This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
All right, Governor McKee, thanks so much for making the time today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Bill. Thanks for the invite.
So obviously a lot going on. We just had the State of the State, which I was at, front row seat. And look, I felt like just from a technical standpoint, you seemed very confident and very in the zone. Not that you weren't last year, but I remember the mic wasn't on when you first started, and it just seemed like now you're in the role of governor in a way that, you own it. Do you feel that, or is that my perception?
No, I think that's accurate. You were, the coming into office as lieutenant governor, into the governor's office. You had all the responsibilities of the governor, but in many ways you weren't perceived as the governor. You go through a very brutal campaign, and people, elect you in the state. So in a good margin, that gives you that feeling that we're heading in the right track. The things that we're working on the two previous budgets, and the way that we've been able, the determination that I described, coming out of the pandemic was real, and now we can build off of that. So I kind of tongue in cheek said at the inauguration, I had the longest interim, time frame between a 4-year term to a full 4-year term. That's true. So we were put into a situation. I was put into a situation that was very serious. With the pandemic, with the economy, with the issues that have to do with the health issues, and I feel confident that we provided that leadership when it mattered most, and people have responded. So, yes, I think you're right. And what we were able to do during that time frame, Bill, was we used that time very efficiently, not only for the pandemic, but in terms of that Rhode Island 2030 plan. So that gives you some confidence that now on day one of a 4-year term, I'm the first governor on a first 4-year term ever to be able to say that clearly we are doing the work from the very first day in office.
I want to talk about housing because it obviously is a major issue. It's something that you've been focused on. We also this week on the podcast here did a week-long special report really bringing together voices from homeless advocates, from One Neighborhood Builders, from the Land Commission and zoning and thinking of municipal leaders and so on and so forth. This collection of voices really yielded one common theme, which is that we need more housing. The Speaker of the House also echoed that last week in the same conversation. So starting there with housing broadly and understanding, which I believe to be true, this idea that supply and demand, we don't have anywhere near enough supply. How do you make the changes going forward from your position to address the housing crisis?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you kind of get your arms around the number of housing that you need. I don't think I've really heard anything specific what that is. I think that we're zeroing in on that based on the that as I mentioned before that 10% goal, right? That has been more of an aspirational goal than a real goal. I think that's where you start, and then you determine how many units actually are needed if that's the correct goal. But you don't have a number down right now, and I think that's really important. Bringing former Secretary Pryor in to be the new secretary. We'll ask for confirmation from the Senate on Secretary Pryor, along with Hannah Moore, who I've worked with for the first 2 years. So I'm going to be very familiar with that leadership team, and I think that's going to be very important to us. But we also have done things that I don't think that people have realized. So asking for the $250 million. Well, let's stop back on my first budget.
Yep.
First time that we actually had a funding source that was rolled into the budget that we requested that's using conveyance fees and other revenues for a steady stream, annual stream for housing. That's first. So you laid the groundwork then. Next year you go in for the $250 million ask of the $1 billion, which is an historic amount of dollars. And we have got those dollars out. $90 million is available right now that the application period ended about last week, I believe. So we've got projects in place. I think we've got close to 1,000 units that are either going to be preserved or developed that are already in the pipeline. So there has been work done, but on development and real estate is something that I'm familiar with, of being a former realtor myself, and bought some income properties and a long time ago, right? But I know that it takes time, and being a former mayor, understanding the process of building permits and also procedural, with the zoning or planning, it takes time to get it done. I think that we're well on the way, but I think that we have a long ways to go, and we'll get there. And this first injection of dollars, I still want to make sure we're leveraging these dollars so that we're getting far more than $250 million worth of housing. And there's projects that I know that are in the pipeline. What we want to bring Stefan on and Hannah on very quickly. We are investing in the budget, Bill, for 21 FTEs. That's something that was requested last year, that we would establish that office in this next budget, this budget we're in right now. So progress is being made, and home prices are coming down. I think that's something we should realize. The market is like it goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. We've seen that in 2008, 2010 timeframe, where prices were came far too far down. That hurt the economy. So we want to have stabilizing prices, especially those people who own homes. The majority of the people who live in a state live in a home, and we want to make sure that their equity is protected as we add inventory to the market.
Yeah, with that, of course, interest rates likely rising, and we see an economy that there's uncertainty. But with that in mind, you've introduced a program where the state is going to assist with down payments for low and, as described, I think, moderate income folks. What does that mean? I know that the numbers there, I think it was $17.5 million, but not million, $17,500 dollars per person. Who qualifies for this? And in light of, declining prices, but likely rising interest rates, what's your message to someone who is a first-time home buyer right now?
So first of all, in this market, the rising interest rates can be some sort of a sticker shock, but they're not a sticker shock to people who had dealt with interest rates at 12, 13% to enter into the housing market, 25, 30 years ago. So historically, these rates are good. Comparatively speaking to a year ago, they're higher. But my understanding, they're going to stabilize and they're going to actually decrease. So, again, we got to understand that these markets are fluid. Pricing changes, or interest rates changes. So that's something we have to deal with, and you have to really work through. That down payment strategy is based on some programs that I know exist. We introduced it last year in the budget. And I said that in the State of the State address last year about there's certain groups of people, particularly the black community, has historically low home ownership, and we want to make sure that we jumpstart that in a way that is fair. But we know it's a process that some people are going to be eligible, some people not. But the whole idea is to get more and more home ownership because, and I can tell you a quick story that. What homeownership means, right? So, I coached a lot of basketball.
Certainly.
And I coached young kids of all colors. So two young kids, two black kids, twins, one buys a home about 7 years ago after really having to really struggle with 2 or 3 jobs to eventually kind of get himself on the right path. He's raising his 4 daughters right now. And his twin brother didn't buy, they were renting for a while, right? So the one individual sold his house after 6 or 7 years, had 6-figure equity that he was able to apply and buy a home in my hometown of Cumberland, which we love having Eric there. And then now just recently his brother bought a home. So now he will build up equity over periods of time. Like I said, there'll be rises and dips in that. But look at the value of home ownership. So we know that we want people to own their homes. We want people who own their homes that actually can pay the mortgages that they were entered to. But this $17,500 is a help, and it's a serious amount of money. I think it's about close to $17 million of funding that's there. I believe that's the number. So that's going to be one of the pieces, right? Home ownership is very, very important, and I think that one of the things that we need to be focused on, not only on rental units, but home ownership really stabilizes communities and it creates long-term generational wealth.
Yeah, it also stabilizes a future workforce and so on and so forth. And like you said, that sense of community, because that's a big thing as well when you have people who grow up in an area or move to an area and then all of a sudden, well, here's Airbnb, so this neighborhood is no longer viable. Now people leave the town, they leave the state sometimes. It's like a new type of brain drain. It's like a soul drain.
Yeah. Well, home ownership is something that I think is very important, like you say, to the strength of a community. And also, I believe, and I've said this publicly, we need to have a population growth strategy in the state of Rhode Island. And we need to make sure that we embrace young people in that growth model and embrace the idea that they're going to raise families in the communities and understand that there's a big value to that. There's been this pushback for some time, we don't want kids in our schools because it costs money. No, you need young people living in your communities, raising families for all the reasons you just said, not only the strength of a community, but supporting local small businesses, supporting the Boys and Girls Clubs activities, supporting the education system. So there's a value to that, and I think this is part of what we're trying to do, Bill. We're making sure that we're trying to create a strategy, and in the housing plan, there will be a population growth model that we will certainly put in long-term in that plan because I think it's so important to the economy and the overall health of the state.
To that point, another element of housing is, and it was described by several of the advocates, whether it's the Coalition to End Homelessness or Crossroads Rhode Island, as a stabilizing factor. And that, of course, is the homeless crisis. You had that literally in your backyard, so to speak, at the State House, and it's a major crisis. Obviously, there's a sad, depressing, what kind of world do we live in? You start asking those types of questions, but then there's also the practical side of it as well. Secretary Pryor seems to be, Josh Saul, great guy, apparently a great musician, had a lot of skills, didn't have the communication skills, it seemed, to bring people together from the nonprofit sector, the advocate sector, the banking sector, the municipal sector. Is that what brings Secretary Pryor to a new level in addressing not only homelessness, but really the housing crisis as a whole, and then in turn finding ways to develop, be it short-term or long-term solutions to homelessness? So
the homelessness issue is it impacts several hundred people in the state. It's a serious issue, and it's a small piece of the housing issue, right? Yep. But it needs to be addressed, and we are addressing that. We have more beds than we had, more shelter beds than we had a year ago, or even 2 years ago, and it's important that we have the data right. I'll be heading to a meeting with municipal leaders, which I'm bringing them in small groups to talk about the very things we're talking about today, right? Mm-hmm. How are we going to work through that issue in a way that really help stabilize the issue, taking people who are maybe hard on their luck and making sure that they have a path to some permanent housing. And also you have some mental health issues here. You have some addiction issues here that are really front and center. It's really important, again, to get the figures right and making sure you know what you're dealing with. Equally as important is that you want to work with the people who are willing to do the work. And also I've invited municipal leaders to actually physically go to the Armory and take a walk through and take a look at what homelessness actually looks like and feels like. It's messy, and it's a difficult task, and the people who are doing God's work in that area and supporting that, like through an Amos House or Crossroads, we really want to be supportive of them. And I think that we're going to do better than other states are. We're already doing better than most states are in terms of addressing that issue. But it is a front and center issue that certainly gains a great deal of media coverage, and we're going to use that. But we also we've asked the General Assembly to put $30 million, a $30 million ask into the budget, so that we can actually identify real estate that we can control, right? Mm-hmm. And so that you have more shelter beds than you need. I think we would have had that this year if Memorial Hospital didn't blow up in our face. Yep. There'll be 170 additional beds there, and there was families that have been relocated through the work of the Amos House on that issue. So, important issue. You don't want to get distracted from the bigger issue, but you certainly need to address it. And I think that we are positioned in Rhode Island to address it very well. And if the General Assembly is favorable on our budget, on all respects, we have placed a significant line item in the budget so that we can control real estate in a way that we have, that we can meet the demand depending on how it fluctuates.
One last point on that is I've heard anecdotes and verified by a journalist of Woonsocket. You have the housing or the homeless camp that was cleared, and then the solution for that person or this one individual was, we'll go to the armory. The problem is that if you go to the armory, if you leave for 15 minutes, you lose your spot. This person works in Woonsocket. That's where their treatment center is in Woonsocket. Their whole world is based out of there. How do you connect that on a practical transportation level? Because RIPTA can only do so much for a person that's, until that permanent state-controlled housing is put in place. These are probably more than just one-off situations where, it's hard for somebody. I mean, I remember the suggestion of, let's set up Burlingame as a homeless encampment instead of Cranston. And the main argument was, well, that's nowhere near where people's services are. How do you fix that?
Well, I think that you have to be local in your efforts. Right now, I can tell you the Armory is servicing far more individuals than what we had originally had projected. I think they're probably bringing them from different areas. And remember, that Armory is a really good example of what we need to do long term, right? So when I put that together with National Guard stepped up in a way, especially when the Memorial Hospital fell out, we needed to offset some of these beds, which we funded over 350 new beds in the summer, which not all of them are open right now. But I felt as though it was very important to offset Memorial Hospital. You have an all-in strategy, a 24-hour strategy at the Armory with services, health services, food, as well as a warming shelter, a warming space, right? So we think that that's a good model. It's working well, but I'll clarify that because if somebody walked in there, it's not your normal lifestyle that people are in, normally day to day, right? So it's a shock to see it, but there's a way to present it. I think you've got to create and that's why we're meeting with municipalities, not only the education issues and the economic issues, but also the housing issues and the health issues, which housing and health are really linked. There's going to be local strategies there, but you also have to be really honest about what we're dealing with, right? So when we're told there's 80 encampments and we can't find 80 encampments, when we're told there's 500 people and I can't get the waiting list to determine who's on the waiting list and who's not on the waiting list, we need to have broader transparency in this information. If it's 1,000, let's identify it. If it's 500, let's identify it. If it's 200. And when Warwick dismantled, that was there was nobody there. The DOT was brought in to take basically trash off of the state property, and yet it was reported that somehow that was an active encampment, and then they were moved. Woonsocket was a little bit different, but I know that talking to the mayor, there was many notifications that were given. Did they handle it absolutely correctly? That's open for debate, but I would say that it's handled in a way in Woonsocket they certainly are doing more than on a percentage basis in this area than other communities are, and I think that's one of the things I think we do. We've got to spread this accountability in a way that municipalities are comfortable with, and that's what we're working on right now.
The coalition says, look, we want to protect those people who are out there, so we don't want to necessarily identify those encampments. So does that just create a cycle of we're never going to get
I think
resolved?
That what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to make sure to clarify that information provided to a governor or a governor's office is confidential in a way that allows the state to respond appropriately to real data.
A couple other quick points here. Education. There's a lot of buzz on Aquidneck Island right now about the regionalization of districts. Is that something that's in your purview? I mean, you've said in the past that you favor regionalization and consolidation if it makes sense. Is that something that you have any thought on at this point, or any advice even as somebody who has experience in creating new types of schools in the Blackstone Valley?
Well, regionalization is good if it works for the communities, right? And if it doesn't, then it's not worth the effort, because there's there is some level of savings, but not as much as what people think. And it's more of a financial move than a academic move. So in our budget, we've made some recommendations to hold districts harmless on student counts, investing in multi-language type learning, investing in special need students in a way that will help financially local communities. So regionalization is fine. It's not it's a financial issue. I'm focused on the finances, like I just said, by layering the things in the budget that can help local districts sustain themselves in ways that I think are important. But I'm also very focused on the academic outcomes, and that's why I laid out I put down the gauntlet. I drew the line in the sand. We are going to meet or exceed Massachusetts levels on our academic outcomes on or before 2030. And so that's what we're engaging in right now, Bill. We're putting together a core group that I believe that I've said within the first 100 days, and we're on day 20 some odd right now, that we'll have a clear plan that will be not only inclusive of what happens inside the school day, but also what happens outside the school day, and kind of connecting them in. And it'll become clearer and clearer that we will have a plan. It will be part of that Rhode Island 2030, which is already in education, higher ed, who's got to play a role in this, as well as the pre-K through 12, as well as the business community, as well as the nonprofits that are really interested in the families and the parents. And it's an all-in community strategy, right? I think you need to make this a 365-day culture shift. And so for that, you're going to need municipal leadership, you're going to need business leadership, you're going to need community leaders. And I believe that we know that there is the reason that the urgency right now is that because of the pandemic, because of the way these schools operated, virtually hybrid-wise, multiple ways, masks and all those type of things, we're not in that area right now. But there is a recovery here. There's a mental health recovery and there's an academic recovery. We have to understand that, and we have to do. And it's unfair, quite frankly, or unrealistic to think that you're going to address those two issues in a rapid way if you just limit yourself to that 182 days in a year.
We have about 8 minutes left.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it. That's really helpful, by the way. Providence schools. Right now there's been, I don't even know how to describe it. There's been some parental and community outrage about school closures. At the end of the day, you're in charge of the Providence School District. Do you think RIDE should have engaged parents more in deciding the 3 school buildings that are going to close? Or is it a situation where you say, hey, look, we're in charge and we got to make decisions, and somebody's going to lose something along the way?
We need to stay the course, right? So if you were in charge of getting a building plan, one of the reasons why the Providence lost its control of its schools was because of the condition of the schools. That's what's clear in the Hopkins report. But I've said, and I made an issue out of this on the State of the State address, I wanted to be very clear, those buildings are in significantly better shape than they were during the Hopkins report. If you were engaged and say, give us a building plan, Bill, or give me a building plan, Governor, or RIDE or City, they would all potentially look different. None would necessarily be better than the other one. This is the time to stay the course. There's a really good plan in place. I think that the word got out a little quicker than RIDE thought it was going to do, as it confided in certain people about what was going to happen. There was a plan to engage with families on this issue, and that's water over the dam right now. The most important thing here is, are we going to improve Providence schools? The state is intervening. I am taking a special interest in this. As you said, I have had a great deal of experience on education and have had success in the schools that we've been able to open up in low-income areas, high-need students, that we have closed the gap significantly to their peers in the schools. We can do the same thing in the district schools. I just outlined why we're going to invest in our district schools, and Providence is no different. We're going to stay the course, not only on the facilities, but we're going to stay the course in terms of academic outcomes. And we can measure that. That's what's so good about this, right? When I say we're going to reach levels of 2030, Massachusetts levels, we can measure that every year. There's 8 testing cycles between now and then, and we will know statewide. we will know what every school needs to do to achieve that goal, and Providence is going to be no different. And so it's a facility issue, which is really good, but we all know if you put a baby grand piano in your living room, your kid's not a concert pianist, right?
Right.
I mean, so facilities are really important, but the focus on the academics and the mental health right now, and working, and our budget talks about recruiting teachers, respecting teachers, right? Retaining them. This is what we're doing at Rhode Island College. So there is just a real comprehensive. When we put it in front of you and all the things I just talked about, the pieces that I just explained will be fitting together, and people will know what role they can play in the state to make this a 365-day effort, not only in Providence, but around all 39 cities and towns. And then what's going to be okay about it is it's going to be very voluntary. You're in, you're out, you're out.
Right.
I think that you're going to have far more people in on this effort, because what could you be better than to investing in the young people, the sons and daughters in the state of Rhode Island, to have them reach their potential. And we know there's an economic benefit for those outcomes too. So we know that families on long term will earn significantly more money if we're able to reach that goal by 2030, and we'll be tracking it all along, Bill. So you're going to know the academic outcomes. We're going to know who's making it, who's not making it to reach that goal. And you're also going to be, we're tracking per capita income in all our communities to make sure that we are increasing incomes in families throughout the state of Rhode Island.
Bernie Bonanno out at the convention center, Channel 12 reporting that you asked George Nee to pass the word on. Why?
Well, I think that first of all, we thank Mr. Bonanno for his work on the convention center. I think that it's an economic area that I'm going to certainly have my my attention on. So it was a good moment to exit, and we'll put some really qualified people in that space. Not much different than when Director Saul, and we thank him for his work here in the state, but we're going to build the strongest team we possibly can, and part of that is building a team that is aligned with the mission that we put out, and that Rhode Island 2030 plan is really important.
Tyree Nichols in Memphis, the young man who was beaten by Memphis police. They're going to release the body cam footage tonight, and I saw that there's a protest planned in downtown Providence tonight. Your message to anybody who is concerned about that situation, police brutality that is evidently has led to murder charges against 5 police officers, and specifically to anybody who turns up to protest tonight in Providence?
Well, I think that peaceful is important, and a protest is important. So they're both equally as important. So, but I also, for me, it's about Rhode Island, right? I certainly have a strong feeling about activity like that, and we know the George Floyd murder is one of those things. I mean, I've had George Floyd's uncle on me on when I was lieutenant governor on our broadcast. So I'm focused on Rhode Island. That's why we put the body cam issue front and center last year. That's why we're working with the Chief of Police Association as well as the state police and our local leadership to make sure that we keep our policing connected with the community, and our community connecting with our police work, our public safety, and holding each side accountable for behavior that is, that's strengthening our community. So, abusive type of brutal attacks by police on residents or citizens anywhere in the country is very troublesome. I'm focused on Rhode Island. That's our job, and what I feel as though is that we have good relationships. I think Hugh Clements was fantastic. I'll be, saying, giving a little goodbye to him today with a lot of people. That community policing in Rhode Island is really strong. We can strengthen that connection even better, and we're going to make sure that I continue to repeat that we're going to have community and police and our public safety connected, our police connected with our public safety, and holding people accountable for behaviors that they should be held accountable for.
Okay, thanks so much. I was going to say thank you very much, Governor McKee. As always, an extreme pleasure.
Yeah.
The first guest ever on the Bartholomew Town podcast. Now, looking back on it, like almost 500 episodes ago. So thank you.
And that was a pleasure being there then, and it's a pleasure being here now. Bill, you're providing a great service, and I can't wait till we get into some of the areas of the budget that you can help out, including our tourism and our entertainment. I know you're a specialist in that area, and we're investing in that. We're investing in the people of the state of Rhode Island, so hopefully that budget gets approved as presented or little changes as possible because it's a good thing for the state.
Always happy to serve the state, no question.
Yeah.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.